Shalom, who praises Yahweh, Ba'ashem, Yahweh Shai, Ba'ashem, Ha'arakah, Kadash. Double honors unto the apostles and elders of great millstone who rule well, and shalom to the whole elect. This is a prophecy and news and prophecy, where basically I feel the filtering of the word news via prophecy, alright? Because Yahweh, Ba'ashem, Yahweh Shai, Ba'ashem, Ha'arakah, Kadash, commanded us to watch as well as pray and to feed his flock. So by watching as well as praying, by watching, alright, we watch by watching the news, alright, and seeing which news relates to the prophecies that were outlined by Yahweh Shai when he was here on the earth. And then that in turn allows us to feed the flock, to give them warning, to utilize the rod the Lord has given us, which really, is a spiritual rod in this time, via the correction of the rod, to goad the people into the right place, and the people I'm speaking of are the Israelites, the so-called Negroes, Hispanics, and Native Americans, and not even all of the Israelites, only the elect in these last days are being goaded into the right place to be avoided, to avoid destruction, basically. So now, to get right into it, this is an article from The Sun, and it reads, Ross Clark, it's time to halt the relentless drive for a cashless society. No one will suffer more than the poor and the elderly, alright? And the funny thing is, technically they're going to suffer, everyone's going to suffer, but ultimately, okay, they will suffer more than, the rich and the young and whatnot, but ultimately everyone's going to suffer, because if you ascribe to the cashless society, it's going to come to a head, all right? Because the head that is going towards, where it's headed to, is basically the RFID chip, which is known as the mark of the beast, spoke of in the book of Revelations, the 13th chapter, and in various other dark sayings spoke throughout the word, in the Holy Scriptures, the Holy Bible, all right? And ultimately, if you take that, you're going to be destroyed when the Lord makes his return upon the earth. So the reason for this cashless society is ultimately for the mark of the beast. So let's get into it. This is how it reads. How ironic that at a time when the Bank of England is putting more women on banknotes in order to promote inclusivity, it is becoming harder for us to get hold of those notes. All right. According to the consumer group, which 5,000 cash points have been lost over the past 18 months, 1 in 10 of the total. All right. So they're saying 1 in 10 of the cash points are going away. All right. Finance industry to rake in $2 trillion a year on electronic payments. So that's how much they're projecting to make of this transition into a cashless society. It tracks your spending habits and makes billions more from flogging data, of course, because data is premium right now. That's why you have a thing known as cookies and there's another word for it, man, but I'm gonna go with cookies for now. I can't remember. But knowing your online habits so that they can market that data, then can be sold onto companies that can utilize that data to obviously monetize it. All right. Millions of poorer and older people are left to struggle in the digital world. So if you're poor and you don't have the ability to utilize these technologies, or if you're old and you're unable to actually get the gist of this tech, you're going to be left out. All right. And this tech is actually it's become known as a thing called fintech, which is financial technology. All right. So anyway, reading on, it says nearly 1,000 of the lost cash points were in the most deprived areas, such as Birmingham, Ladywood, which has lost 47 machines. All right. So they took away 47 of those machines in that one town. All right. Some towns no longer have a machine at all, or if they do, it is one that charges people a fee to access their own hard-earned cash. All right, we have a lot of those machines, especially in the city of London, in the city, because you have tourists that come over, and you have a lot of people with a lot of big money in their pockets, they go out on the weekend, they're too drunk, or they're too impatient to even, or not well adversed with the cash points that don't charge you. And even you also have cash points that don't charge you, the ones that are like with Tesco, Sainsbury's, that are Tesco's and Sainsbury's, for those outside of the UK, are basically like supermarket chains that basically shut down their the use of their, and it makes sense, it just hit me now, they shut down the use of the cash point, because the only reason why they have the free cash point there, free cash point withdrawal there, is so that if you have an inability, if you don't want to pay by your card, you can just step outside the store and withdraw the cash. All right, so they're making it more and more difficult for the use of cash points. All right, which you may know, I just remembered, if you're over in the States, listen to this, ATM machines. All right, so anyway, the disappearance of cash points is partly to do with a disagreement over fees between the banks and other operators of the Link network of cash points. And yeah, Link is a network that deals with cash points, and I believe the reason why this is obviously being done is because they're trying to eliminate this company in itself, so that they can then monopolize the distribution of cash. Obviously, they're making a percentage of Link anyway, because the banks create the cash. But then more so, I believe it's down to the fact that, this is me just taking a guess, that they want to funnel everything into what? Electronic payments, all right? Being a cashless society. So they want to, eliminate the only competition in terms of cash points, all right? It's the same process they use with the Oyster cards, all right? With the paper, the trains, all right? That's the same kind of model, and the buses, same model they're using with these cash points. But there's another story underlying the disappearance of cash. There was a huge lobbying operation to try to persuade us all to go cashless. So if you know anything about lobbying, it's when you have companies that are in cahoots or in bed with the government's in bed with, and they basically, for their own business, their own gain, they basically form a relationship with the government, and they send them the money they need for whatever plans they have in government, and in turn they receive favors. All right, so it says there is a huge lobbying operation. So these lobbyists have an operation going on to try to persuade us all to go cashless and use only electronic forms of payments. All right, some towns no longer have a machine at all, or if they do, it is one that charges slackier. Already, some fashionable bars and restaurants advertise themselves as cashless. Sainsbury's recently opened a store where the only way to pay was via a smartphone app. All right, so you could only pay via an app, though it was rapidly forced to change its policy when confused shoppers jammed the help desk. So, they tested it out, but they could see they weren't ready. And this even furthermore details the people not being ready. Little known to most people, David Cameron, right, the Prime Minister before Boris and Theresa May, who actually initiated the vote for Brexit, all right, nearly announced in his 2015 Conservative Party conference speech that Britain would become the world's first entirely cashless society by 2020. So they wanted to do that, but this what happened. He only pulled back when advisors warned that the public was not ready for such a move. And how do they know that the public weren't ready? Because they had things such as this happen. So it shows you when these little rollouts happen and these little things happen in society where they do these things, it's to test, to prime the people to see if they're ready for great change in society, right? And obviously the thing with the Oyster now and the contactless payment in terms of transport, that's gradually being done, all right? And it's for the sake of people being, moving towards a cashless society. Vital freedom. Too right, we are not ready to have cash snatched from our wallets and be forced to pay for everything with cards or smartphones. And I hope we never will be. All right. I have nothing against electronic forms of payment when we choose to use them. I do plenty of shopping online, often choose to pay by card in shops too. But the right to use cash is a vital freedom if we are to avoid being exploited. All right. I am sick of being told that going cashless is for my convenience. No, it isn't. And this is why. It is for the enrichment of some very powerful financial interests who have been furiously lobbying governments to abolish cash. All right. So, in 2016, investors worldwide put 19 billion. So these investors a conglomerate of worldwide investors came together to put up 19 billion dollars worth of money money into financial technology or fintech industry. So how do you think these investors came together? Via groups like the Bilderberger group and the Club of Rome, these different elitist Illuminati meetings that basically allowed them to, put their heads together and say, this is what we're going to move towards. And then that in turn gave them an opportunity to put up funds to generate more funds. All right. Why? In the expectation of huge rewards. All right. According to the Boston Consulting Group, the industry currently earns 1 trillion, all right, a year in revenue. So these people put up 19 billion. That's not even a tenth of what's set to come back if the earnings are around 1 trillion. That's like not 1%. It's not 1%. One would be 1 billion. Here I am doing maths. I believe it's like 2%, something like 10%, something like that, man. I don't even know why I'm trying to work this out right now. I ain't that sharp right now. But anyway, that's a big whole lot of gain they're set to make if they're only investing 19 to about 20 billion, and they're set to the return to be 1 trillion. All right. So reading on, a year in revenue, such as fees when we use our credit card or download a payment app to our phone. By 2023, it expects that to double, so it's going to be worth 2 trillion. All right. No prizes for guessing where that extra 1 trillion is going to be coming from. You and me. All right. And how's that going to come? It might be free for consumers to use a debit card now, but you can be sure it won't be a free but you can be sure it won't be if the option of paying by cash is abolished. So let's remember now, debit cards, they're taking away. Even they say, for example, they still have cash withdrawal machines around. That company Link ain't gonna make no money no more. It's gonna be directly linked to the cash, to the banks, for them to make money. They're gonna charge you at a premium if you want cash, as opposed to you using electronic payment. All right. So another reason the industry wants to force us to go cashless is to sell data on our shopping habits, right? The information age. When we buy things with cash, we are anonymous. But when we spend on our cards, our spending can be tracked, all right? And even more so, if you have an RFID chip inside of your body, then it's 100 that is 100% on point. Like, there's no way of you getting around that. All right, there's no such thing as that removes fraud out of the quote unquote. It removes fraud. All right, so they'd say from out of the conversation, and that'll give them 100% knowledge of it's the correct data that's being relayed to them. Visa, MasterCard, and American Express have already set up subsidiaries to monetize this data and flog it to for marketing purposes. So these big companies already got companies underneath them that are utilizing this data. While some stand to make fortunes, the victims of an increasingly cashless economy are the poor and elderly who find their lives made ever more difficult. Hard though it may be for some of us to believe, when a cashless London transport system, see, I ain't even read this part, man, but that was the layup, man. The cashless London transport system, all right, was being discussed. It emerged that 10% of the passengers do not have a bank account, all right. It is not uh, it is not easy to open an account if you do not have a fixed address and cannot produce things such as utility bills. So basically, if you want to open a bank account, what do you need to have? You need to have more proof that you're a fixture in a society. All right. If you ain't, then you ain't gonna be able to. You're gonna be baby. Basically, you're gonna be ostracized, and you ain't gonna be able to actually maneuver within society. A precursor to the RFID chip. All right. How are such people supposed to cope in a cashless society? They're not meant to. All right. There are some things such as parking in certain towns which can now only be done by a smartphone app. All right. That might make sense to young, educated policymakers in Whitehall and council officials who have grown up with the devices and find that using them is second nature. Yet surprising though it may seem to some, 7.5% of the population has never used the internet. All right. So you got that generation, they're basically waiting. Let me read on actually. 4 in 5. Let me finish actually before I forget. Yeah, that generation that were around prior to technology. Really, even a quote unquote what they call a millennial, and I grew up with a lot of this technology, but all the technological advances I've seen them come. I remember when there was dial-up and when you had to use a house phone if you wanted to speak to someone, and paging and whatnot and these different things. But guess what? I've seen a change, and I've grown with the change. But you have people that the telephone was groundbreaking to them, and they're still around. They don't even know what a smartphone is. All right. 4 in 5 over 65s do not own a smartphone, and with good reason. Even without arthritis or serious problems with my vision, I find the device is extremely fiddly to use. Right. I struggle to read what is on the screen, and I often find my phone battery has run down by the end of the day. All right. So reading on online scams. I wouldn't want to be without a phone, but even less would I want to be reliant on it as my electronic wallet. All right, as my electronic wallet. When the Cameron government was seriously considering turning Britain cashless, one of the reasons mentioned was that it would help tackle crime on the grounds it is supposedly harder for criminals to handle electronic money as it can be traced. But you got things. I'm just gonna jump in right there. You got the dark web. I believe you use Tor as a what they call it. What they call these things as a, that Safari and Chrome and Windows Explorer as a. I'm trying to remember the fucking word, man. Excuse me. Web browser. That's it. It's a dark web browser, basically Tor. So you can be untraced on there. All right. And you have people that can buy VPNs and mask their IP numbers and go untraced or go underneath or utilize someone else's IP address to be untraceable. All right, that's for those that are really into their tech like that. But try telling that to the many victims of online scams who lost a collective 1.2 billion last year in Britain. All right, so they in their case they don't give a shit anyway, man, because ultimately, they're set to. There's always gonna. Excuse me. Their agenda is to chip the people, man, and that's that. That is the end all and be all. So this little fraud or scamming and whatnot, it don't matter to them, because ultimately they got think tanks that they have things in place, what they call it, contingency plans in place for these types of people. Just because electronic transfers That's how I know I'm not all the way there, man. Transfers are theoretically traceable. Doesn't mean anyone is actually doing the tracing. Online fraud simply isn't being taken seriously enough by the police or any other authority until or unless it is going cashless. Um, will expose more people to fraud as they are forced to open online accounts. Now, this is something interesting because I'm not even gonna. I found out some information. I'm not even gonna say how I found out the information, but I personally didn't find out information, but I was informed of the information that there is a PDF that's been put out on on the web. I don't know how it got put out on the web because this is what was being discussed with me and the individual that put me up on this. That there's a step-by-step booklet of how to do fraud. All right, with everything. And all I can say is that information, the only way it could be let out is by the government, because the people that are privy to doing those kind of things, it's like it's a secret society within itself. It's like drug dealing. You wouldn't know how to the ins and outs of drug dealing unless you have someone teach you how to do it. It's the same with the fraud. Unless you have someone teach you and let you know all the information, you would be privy to everything to do with fraud, right? So they got a PDF detailing the ABCs and how to do it and what to do. And the only people I believe will put that out as a government for what purpose? Who benefits? They do, because then fraud becomes a real threat that they have to, and fraud becomes a big threat, and that really leads into what's this thing called? What's that thing? It's bear with me, man. My mind is it's lagging today. Not data. It's like hacking, like other countries hacking into other countries' security systems and all that type of stuff. There's an actual word for it. I can't remember right now. I know it's on the tip of my tongue. If I remember, I'll put it in the comment section. But anyway, point being is that look, it's all in cahoots. Is leading to that, and there was a time. This is something that I got put up on when I was in the world. There was a time when the whole of London, all the different gangs, London's segregated into north, east, southeast, southwest, west, northwest London. All right, those are the various segments of London, and the boroughs are segregated accordingly to that. But with that being said, they had a website called UK gangs or London gangs or something like that, and they had details going into gangs, and this was around 2009 or so when I heard about this. The site's still there, but all the information got taken down, and they had in-depth breakdowns of the gangs and who led the gang at what period of time and what kind of big stories, and this was down to a T. 33 boroughs, I believe, in London, and we're talking like generations going back to the 80s. Like, we're talking about 3 decades worth of gangs being covered and various people that were at the pinnacle of that gang. So we're talking 33 boroughs, different gangs that reigned in that time for 3 decades, going into detail, all right, from the inner city to the greater parts of London. And I believe that was done by the police to put it out there to exploit this information and for certain people, for whatever kind of task force they were utilizing. So the point being said, with this fraud booklet being put out there on the web, the reason why it was done was to encourage people to do it. Now that's the other thing I remember now. And also you have scam rap. I watched a video on it, scamming, fraud being a big thing scam rapping being a big thing over in America now. And only because, quote, I'm so-called Nigerian, I'm very aware of this fraud stuff, right? Because it's something that's, it's not new to so-called Nigerians, But basically, the way it's been optimized, the way it's hit its peak is kind of crazy, man. And I believe that's being done on purpose for them to now turn around and clamp down on it, and to be, because what did we just read previous in the article? It said that online fraud simply isn't being taken seriously enough by the police or any other authority. And let's remember, anytime there was a great change in with England, for example, chip and pin. Right, the reason why we have chip and pin is because people were killing fraud, man, big time. So that was a contingent put in place to clamp down on fraud. So all these things are reactions to a circumstance, and that's the reason why these things are happening. Right? What is wrong with having a variety of ways to pay and letting us choose? Cash, cards, and checks have happily coexisted for decades, and there's no reason why cash cannot continue to exist alongside payment apps and the like. Far from sneakily trying to abolish cash, the government shouldn't be standing up for our right to use it, ensuring, for one thing, that there are enough free cash points for all of us to use to access our money. All right? Again, the reason why it's being done is for the RFID chip. So now I'm going to grab a couple scriptures. This Habakkuk 2 and 5. Yea, also, because he transgresseth by wine, he is a proud man. And it's talking about Esau, man. Right? Transgressive by wine, philosophy. All right? And that's what is going to be utilized in order to instill this new system of the cashless society in place. The philosophy of the convenience of e-payment. All right? And like they said, the people that are being cultivated in this era, they're used to the use of technology, and they don't mind going with it, because that's the wine that he's feeding to the people. He's a proud man, neither keepeth at home. And that's why Esau is going all over the earth, heaping up lands unto himself, who enlargeth his desire as hell. As it tells you in the book of Malachi, they call him the board of wickedness, because anywhere Esau goes is basically, hell. All right, and is as deaf and cannot be satisfied, but gathereth unto himself all nations, and heapeth unto him all people. And how better is he going to do that but by the RFID chip, keeping track of all the people upon the earth and having them on a GPS system, so as they can be tracked and seen, like Cerebral, man, like Xavier and Cerebral, man. He's just, basically Esau, starting with the banking elites, the Rockefeller, the Rothschilds, Rockefellers, DuPonts, Gettys, Bilderbergers, all these various banking family, Oppenheimers. They're doing this for what reason? All right, to play God, the Most High, basically. Shall not all these take up a parable against him, and a taught in proverbs against him, and say, woe to him that increaseth that which is not his? How long? All right. And that's the thing, starting with the elect of the nation of Israel, the Most High is waking us up out of our slumber, sorry. And that's why it tells you in Revelations, the 11th chapter, that they that saw us being the elites, those that were made a tumult together, a covenant together, to basically take our name from off the earth, when they saw us stand upon our feet, they was in great shock, basically. They couldn't believe it, all right? Because they put on the utmost hell to make sure that we don't know nothing, all right? So we're definitely the ones saying, woe unto him that increaseth that which is not his. How long? And you have these other nations as well, according to the prophecy in the book of Joel, that have been slated to basically say that, to basically for the weak to say I am strong, and to strengthen themselves by, buying and putting their money into the sword, as Esau did, and now putting themselves on somewhat of an even playing field, and having the ability to threaten Esau's power structure, all right? and to him that ladeth himself with thick clay, all right, with debts, all right, and that's what's happening. And even this is a form of debt as well, that's being laid in the cashless society. Verse 7, shall they not rise up suddenly that shall bite thee, and await that shall vex thee, and thou shalt be for booties unto them, all right? Because ultimately they're going to be booties unto their own. The whore that sitteth on the beast is going to be, with the 7 heads and 10 horns, is that ultimately going to be taken out by the beast with the 7 heads and 10 horns. And then and then other nations also that are in cahoots with them are gonna, let their missiles go upon America. And then ultimately the booty they're gonna be for is the nation of Israel, by serving 1,000 years of slavery and being put in a pit and burnt for off the face of the earth and never exist again. Because thou hast spoiled many nations, all the remnant of the people shall spoil thee, because of men's blood, and for the violence of the land of the sea, and of all that dwell therein. Right? Okay, I want to jump to James now. Could even go to Job as well. Well, I'll go to James. I'll probably wrap up on that, man. Alright, James 5:1. Go to now, ye rich men. Right, who's these rich men that should go to now? The 12 banking elites, man. The Rothschilds, Rockefellers, DuPonts, Gates, Oppenheimers, so on and so forth. All right, weep and howl for your miseries that shall come upon you. And they're aware of this because it tells you in the prophecy written in Revelations 12:12 that the devil knoweth they have a short time cometh down with great wrath. That's why he's making these. That's why you had David Cameron want to say, yo, by 2020 we're going to be a cashless society. That would have been just under 3 months away from being a cashless society in the UK. All right, because they know they're under pressure via the Most High power. And it comes out that they deal with a lot more so-called UFO sightings than they like to tell you, man. And according to Zechariah, the 5th chapter, it tells you that it's a curse that God forth upon the earth that goes into the house of the thief, basically. Who's a thief? Esau, man. Right, who stole the earth and named everything after his own name, who today is called the so-called white man. So called himself that in fact to denote purity, but his real name is Esau Edom, all right, the red Hebrew Edomite. So it's saying to them, your riches are corrupted and your garments are moth-eaten. That's right, because the gold and silver is blood money, all right, and that means there's a blood debt upon it that has to be collected, and the blood's going to be returned blood for blood, all right. Your gold and silver is cankered, that means it's destroyed, and the rust of them shall be a witness against you. What does gold and silver rust? No, not necessarily, but it's saying that this gold and silver is basically, it's again blood money, and it's going to be a witness upon them because of where it came from, slavery, all right, war, death and destruction, all right. And these things have to be returned upon the head of that man that did so, and shall eat your flesh as it were fire. Ye have heaped treasure together for the last days. Behold the hire of labourers who have reaped down your fields, which is of you kept back by fraud, crieth, all right. And that even goes into the fact that right now, what we just read in the article, what they're trying to do is basically the next step in their plan is to charge people a premium to withdraw their cash for them to make money, all right. And that premium may be as small as a penny, 5p, 10p, 50p, but whatever it is, they're gonna make a premium on it, and that is fraud. Because in order for you to access your money, here it is, they're already taxing us. When we buy, when we get our paycheck, we pay tax, and then when we buy items, we're paying tax on top of that. They're taxing us, say about, I heard it's something like around 45%, I believe, of anything that we use in the UK carries about 45% tax. Now they're gonna add an extra tax for you to access your own funds that you worked hard for, right? And the cries of them which have reaped are entered into the heirs of the Lord of Sabbath oath, All right, the Lord of the Sabbath oath is the Lord of hosts. All right, Sabbath oath goes back to the Hebrew word, I believe it's Tazabah, which means armies. All right, the hosts of the heavens, and you have the various hosts that the Lord is over. You have the hosts of the wicked, the hosts of the righteous, the wicked angels being Satan and all his minions, the righteous being on the right hand side, Michael and his archangel and all those angels, then us in the flesh, then all the armies on this, the armies of the animals. The Lord is over all of that, man. You have lived in pleasure on the earth and have been wanton. You have nourished your hearts as in the day of slaughter. You have condemned and killed the just, and he doth not resist you. Be patient therefore, brethren, unto the coming of the Lord. Behold, the husbandman waiteth for the precious fruit of the earth. That's right, and we're waiting, man. We're waiting for the reaping of the fields, right? To get, Matthew the 13th chapter. And have long patience for it until he receive the early and latter rain. Be ye also patient, establish your hearts, for the coming of the Lord draweth nigh.